Hello, I'm Meg Evershed. I'm from the Nutmeg Company and we specialise in three-dimensional cross-stitch and cross-stitch on perforated paper. But today I'm just going to talk about ordinary cross-stitch. If you're not familiar with it, it's a really lovely hobby to pick up. You will find that it isn't an instant craft. It's something that takes a while to do, but it really has benefits because it takes a time and you're going to spend time quietly enjoying it. In fact, if you've been stitching for a couple of hours, you might feel that the world's a much better place afterwards. But if you're a complete beginner with cross-stitch, you'll need to think about what you need to start with. And those things really are fabric, thread, a needle, and a chart. Most cross-stitch these days is what we call counted cross-stitch, and you have a chart and work from that onto the fabric. Now, I'll show you what I mean. This is a chart for one of our pieces called Penguin Hall. I've got it here to show you. It's a little house, the roof comes off, so you can use it as a gift box if you want to. And the chart that you're looking at here shows you two of the walls. This here is the chart for this penguin, and this the chart for this penguin, and you can see the windows, the brickwork marked out at the side, and then over here, oh, what are these two doing? He's presenting her with a Christmas gift. You can see him here. He has thoughts of love on his mind, and he's got some mistletoe that he's holding behind his back, and she's feeling very shy. So this is the chart. It has all four walls on it. This is the front wall with the front door, and these two, one is up the ladder putting up the decorations, and you can see those here. So you'll have a chart and you'll work from the chart onto your fabric. Now, this is one that we've begun but haven't finished. This is the Bashful Penguin and the one offering the gift. Let's turn this over again. Here we are. So you can see here how the chart translates onto stitching on the fabric. So this is this penguin here and this one here. Now this fabric is called Ada. Sometimes people pronounce it Aida, but I usually say Ada when I'm talking about it. There are lots of different forms and colours of Ada. I'll show you a few more so you get the general idea. This is a white one, but the squares are much larger than they are on the penguins. This one's dark green, and here's a pretty pink colour. Then we have ordinary blacks and greys. A navy blue. You can find a cross-stitch fabric in almost any colour if you try. And this one is the same as we're doing here. Now, you will find that the squares for this one are much smaller. Every Ada fabric is labelled with a count. The count means the number of holes per inch. So this one is 14 count. There are 14 holes to the inch, and all the colours that we've got are 14 count as well. This one is 18 count. That means there are 18 holes to the inch, and the crosses that you make on it are going to be much smaller. So if you're struggling to look at things at the moment, as I do sometimes, you may find that this is rather a small count to stitch without a magnifying glass or a daylight bulb. But the benefits of 18 count are that you can get all sorts of little details in that don't really look right on a larger count. So this is the fabric. Now the threads that we're using, generally speaking, this sort of cross stitch is worked with stranded cotton. We have a lot of that around. Again, you can get it in a huge variety of colours. This is a selection of blues. I'll take this bit out and show you. Now it's made up of 6 different strands, all put together in one length. Now if you're working on this very fine 18 count, you'll need to use just one strand of thread. But if you're working on the larger 14 count, then you'll need 2 strands of thread, otherwise your stitching won't stand out properly. So choose your colours, choose your fabric, use the number of strands of thread that you need, and then you're all set to work your cross stitches. Now, I'm going to show you some simple stitches. And I'm not actually stitching on the fabric. To make it look easier, I'm going to stitch on this perforated paper. Now this is 14 count, so it has 14 holes to the inch, but the holes are much bigger than they are on fabric, so it's very easy to see. At Nutmeg we use this to make lots and lots of greetings cards. We do other things with it as well, but mainly it's greetings cards. It's ideal to stitch on and then cut and fold. It never frays. You do have to be careful not to get it wet, but that's the only real problem with it. So you can see the holes here clearly, so I'm going to work a cross stitch on it. If you're not familiar with that, cross stitch is a really easy form of embroidery. It has all sorts of advantages. It's a really good one to start with. So here we go. I'm going to make the first cross. I bring the needle up through the hole. Now I didn't put a knot in it, but I'm going to leave a little tail on the back. And the first of the stitches is a diagonal one. Like this. And then the next stitch is another diagonal one on top of it. Here we go. So you see that's a cross, a bit like the white cross on the Scottish flag of St Andrew. And then we can make another one, and as we do, we're going to make sure we catch in that tail that we left at the back. So one diagonal stitch, and then another diagonal stitch. And we can carry on as long as we need to with that colour. At the back we've caught in the tail, and on the front the only really important thing to notice is that all the top stitches of the crosses lie in the same direction. If you do them in different directions, it will give your work a very odd look. It will be a bit scrappy and untidy, but if the top stroke of each cross stitch is lying in the same direction, it will give a beautiful look. You can see here, if you look at the windows, you'll see that all the cross stitches are worked with the top stitch going in the same direction, and it gives a fine finish to it. Now the needle I'm using is actually a tapestry needle. It has a blunt edge. I can feel it, but it's not piercing the skin. And this is important because you don't want this to pierce your fabric too much. Especially when you're working on paper, you definitely don't want the needle to pierce the paper. You just want it to go through the holes. So when you're starting cross stitch, if the kit you're starting with doesn't have a needle, make sure you get a tapestry needle. They come in different sizes. A size 24 is ideal for stitching on this perforated paper, and a size 26 is ideal for stitching on fabric. Now, we're going to do different things, not just cross stitch. You'll find that in a simple cross stitch kit, you're going to have cross stitches on it, but you're also going to have some back stitch. So before we finish, we'll just show a couple of back stitches. It's quite easy to do. Here we are. I'm using paper again because I think that's the easiest thing to see. And we're taking it in and just leaving a little tail at the end, as we did with the cross stitch. Now, the best way to describe this is 1 stitch back, 2 stitches forward. We're going into the hole behind the one where we came up, and then we're going into the hole ahead of it, and then down again in the first hole. And then we're going 2 forwards again, and back. Now, backstitch is used to outline things. It gives a good definition to what you're stitching. And if you look again at my penguin haul, you'll see that the backstitch really makes this window stand out. It's outlined the frame and it's put stays across the window, straight lines dividing the window into panes. So if you look at this one and then look at this one, you'll see that this looks much more like a window because of the backstitch. But you can also use it as a decorative stitch in its own right. And if you look here, you'll see that we've got the bricks at the edge of each wall, and they're just backstitched on, using a stitch just like the one I've shown you. If we went up here, and then back again, you'd see that it was like the brickwork on Penguin Hall. Now, as you get more familiar with cross stitch, you'll come across other stitches, fractional stitches to form shapes, and that's what you've got here on the chart. You can see this isn't a full cross stitch, it's making the shape of the penguin. And you can have French knots as well. Probably better to leave those until you're a bit experienced. And you can have half cross stitches, which will give you a look of water or grass if they're stitched together in a large group. But first of all, the simple cross stitches and back stitches will be fine to start your first cross stitch. So the most important thing is that you enjoy what you do. That's more important than anything else. So happy stitching, and thank you for watching.